Hello there, this is Instructor Paul, and in this lecture, we're going to be creating PowerShell functions. So what I'm going to do is open the PowerShell ISE as an administrator, and we're going to jump right in and just start creating functions. So we can create a function by writing the command function. Next, we'll type in the alias or identifier of the function. And what I'm going to do is just call this echo text. Make sure I spell it right. Although it's not really important, I could call it anything I wanted to. I'm gonna do an opening brace and go down 2 lines and do a closing brace. Then I like to go up inside the function and press tab to tab indent my functions and make it look nice and pretty. And I'm just gonna say, you have created your first function. And I'll do an ending quotation mark. The last thing we need to do is call this function so it can execute the commands. Now let's call the function above the command. So if I just write echo text, that is enough to execute this function. But we're actually going to run into an error, and I'll explain it in just a minute. So if I hit run script, we're going to get an error saying echo text is not a recognized name of a commandlet, function, script file, or operable program. And the reason for this is that we tried to call the function echo text before we declared it. Now, this function is now loaded into memory. So we could call this again by just hitting the play button, and it will actually execute. We could also just remove the function, call it again, and it'll execute. And we can come down here and say echo text, and it'll execute just like we expect. I'm going to go back up here and hit Control Z to undo that. So you should always, as a general rule, call the function after you declare it. So keep that in mind. If you don't want to have errors with your scripts, you really need to call your functions after you declare them. Now let's learn about how we can pass an argument to a function. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to modify this function, and instead of echoing a specific string, I'm going to say echo, and we're going to call the variable args, stands for arguments. And now if we just go back to our echo text, all we need to do is pass an argument to our function echo text. And we can do that by just saying, I am passing an argument. So this string right here is actually going to be the argument that we're going to pass to echo text, and it's going to echo that argument. So if we execute this script, we can see here that it outputs, I am passing an argument. And if we wanted to format this, we could put this inside of parentheses, in quotation marks saying argument. We could do a colon, space, quote, and then a plus sign. And then if we re-execute this, we'll get something kind of fancier. It says the argument is, I am passing an argument. Now we could pass multiple arguments to the script by just saying, this is the second argument. And if we run this script, what's going to happen is we get argument, I am passing an argument, and this is the second argument. See, it's combined into kind of one, because essentially arguments is an array. So what that means is we can isolate these by putting in an open square bracket and saying 0. So this would reference the first element in the array. And if we wanted to access this second argument that we're passing, we would simply say 1. So let's go ahead and just run the script. And here we can see I am passing an argument. If I change this to a 1 and I execute this function, we get the second argument. Now we can actually write a script that would manipulate both of these. And let's do that. Let's create a function and call it add. And I'm going to do an opening brace and a closing brace. And I'm just going to say echo, and then inside of parentheses, args 0 plus args 1. We'll do a closing parentheses, and then we're going to call the function and we'll say add 5 and 10. So when we add 5 and 10 together, it should give us 15. So let's hit the play button, and we get the output 15. Now that's all well and good, but what if we were doing something a little bit different when we needed to specify the order, or if we wanted to do something in a separate order? For example, let's create a new function, and let's call it echo text. What we can do is we can specify, instead of just passing arguments, which need to come in a specific order, we can do something called a parameter. So if we write param and do an opening parentheses and go down a couple lines, do a closing parentheses, we can actually specify parameters that we want this function to have and that we can pass. So we could just say, for example, $first parameter, and we can put a comma, go down another line, and we can say second parameter. So now we can say echo, and inside of parentheses, we could say first, colon, space, quote, and then we'll do plus first parameter. And we'll just copy this line, paste it, and we'll change this to second. And we'll change this to the variable name. I'm just copying and pasting to make sure I don't have any typos. We'll just have the second parameter here. Now we can call this function echo text, and we can say dash, and now we are asked to select which parameter we want to specify. Let's say we want to specify the second parameter first. I can do that by hitting dash second parameter and then just saying this is the second. And I can say dash first parameter, this is the first. Okay, so now if I execute the script, I get first, this is the first parameter, and second, this is the second parameter. Now you'll notice this is different because we're actually able to specify the order we want to pass parameters to versus when we were doing an argument, whatever we specified first would always be the first argument. Okay, so I can change this to first and I can change this to second. And vice versa. I can hit run script and now it swaps the order. Now there's another way that you can actually specify parameters, and we can do that down here. So we can say another function just so you see the difference. Function echo text 2. We'll do an open parentheses. We'll say first parameter. We'll do a comma, space, $, second parameter. And we'll do a closing parentheses, opening brace, go down a couple lines, and just like always, we'll say echo. We can actually just copy this text from above. It's going to be essentially the same. That way we'll save a little bit of time here. Okay, and remember that these parameters and variables are only available, or the scope is only inside of the function. So because I'm using the same parameter names or variable names, they're not going to have an issue because these are only accessible inside of the actual functions. So if I go to echo text 2, I can do dash first parameter and dash call it whatever I want and dash second parameter. And it's going to be essentially the same as what we declared up here. Now, what's the difference? Really, there isn't any difference. It really comes down to your personal preference and how you want to pass your variables. So if we execute this script, I'll just highlight echo text 2 and I'll just clear the screen to make it easier to see. I'll drag this up a little bit. If I just hit F8, we get the same exact result. First parameter is ABC, second parameter, I really should have put XYZ there, or something different than ABC. But if I execute that, we can see the second parameter was X, Y, and Z. And remember, the main difference between this and just passing args is that we can specify them in whatever order we would like to do. So if I execute this again, we can see here, again, stays in the same order, even though we reverted or switched the order up here. Okay, so that's everything that we need to cover in PowerShell Functions. Remember, it allows you to remove redundant blocks of code inside of your scripts. So we can call these functions as many times as we'd like. It's something that you're gonna need to know how to do when you want to write complicated or complex, even sometimes simple PowerShell scripts. So great job getting through this lecture. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.